So it sometimes happens that the sequel is better than the original. I'm thinking like Godfather Part 2, maybe some of the Batman movies, maybe something in the Marvel Universe. Dr. Mike, any sequels better than the original? What stands out when I say that to you?
What stands out to me, when it comes to Indiana Jones, I love The Last Crusade.
Okay, but Temple of Doom was just, let's not even talk about that.
Yeah, I skipped that one. For me,
Crystal Skull.
Yeah, 1 and 3, the odd number ones are the good ones.
Actually, I don't think Indiana Jones is a good example at all. Because
I'm just saying that there is a sequel which I think is on par with the original.
Iron Man 2 is better than Iron Man.
All due respect, you're wrong about that. And then, of course, sometimes things go the other way. The Matrix sequels. What happened there? I mean, just Basic Instinct Part 2, RoboCop 3. Just sometimes
that
a
was
sequel.
The one in Detroit, right? With
I have no idea.
Right?
Police Academy.
The point is that you never know what you're going to get with a sequel, and we're curious to see how it works out with the return of Donald Tusk, the sequel Part 2, The Return.
What a build-up, John.
Thank you. Build-up. This giant of Polish politics announced this week that he is back. Yes, that was too easy.
Elephantine tooth.
Exactly. And so now we're just curious about how this is going to go, because this is really, really big news. I mean, this is kind of like, I don't know, Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or Margaret Thatcher. I'm a bad example there. But, somebody, coming back
right now
from the grave. Somebody returning, you say, okay, I'm going to do this
they have to vote for
again.
This lady's turning in her grave as we...
Dr. Mike, first impressions on hearing that Donald Tusk is returning to Polish politics as, correct me if I'm wrong, is basically the head of Platforma Obywatelska, the party that he founded, I think almost 20 years ago now.
Meh. Honestly, they've been building up for this for years now. Ever since the opposition in general, but specifically PO, has been falling apart, leadership issues with values and direction. They've been saying, like, everything was so good when Donald Tusk was in charge. And, it's like, well, was it really that good? Or is this just like, tinted glasses?
Well, they were in power for a long time with him at the helm. So
exactly.
Doing something right.
And that's what they're hoping will happen again now that he's come back. We have the first polls coming out of polls showing how sentiments have shifted now that Tusk is back in charge of
high negatives for Tusk.
Generally, this is why I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference, because the people that don't like Tusk didn't like him back then and didn't like his creation of PO and went away. And they're not likely to be enticed back to PO. If anything, this just helps people in the PO camp to feel like they've got some initiative back, a little bit of momentum, and somebody to actually organize behind instead of like deciding who's in charge. So in that sense, it could help them organize. And the truth is, he was always really good at PR and presentation to the media. So that will be of some benefit. The only problem is, the way the media landscape works right now is part of the media loves PO in that camp and hates the other side, and the other media part of the landscape hates Tusk. And viewers really aren't going to switch sides right now, so I can't really see him bringing more voters into that side.
If you hated him before, you still hate him.
Exactly. If anything, this might also help Peace and their voters have something more specific to target their anger against. Because right now, they have somebody with history that they don't like, that they can go back to all the mistakes he made before. And Peace was kind of at this point where, when something was going wrong, they kept on blaming it on the previous administration. But now it's been years. But now somebody from the previous administration is back, so they can keep reminding people of all those things they hated, which is why they voted for Peace in the first place.
I think you can make the case that this is both a embarrassingly stupid, horrible move, and it's also a genius move. And let me just give the top level reasons for both of those positions. This is a horrible, stupid, embarrassing move because, for me, this is Platforma admitting that they have nothing else. They have nothing else. They have no one else. For the last 8 years since Tusk left the party, they have done nothing. There's no reason to talk about them. There's no reason to support them. There's no one in the party that has established themselves, organizationally within the party and in terms of public support as the person to beat. I mean, think about it. Tusk left for almost a decade and walks right back into where he picked up and left off because no one else is there.
And everybody's happy to let him do it.
And everybody's happy to let him do it. So Platforma has been treading water for a decade almost, and this is admitting it. This is saying, yeah, we've been useless for a long time, and we have nothing else for you.
Well, no, they've not even been treading water. I mean, they've been gently sinking, haven't they?
Yeah, well, exactly. That's another. You're right, Josh, because I think had this not happened, and this is kind of crossing over into my case for supporting the move, had this not happened, I think Platforma disappears within a couple of years. They had lost all momentum. There was no reason to vote for them. They were being passed up by new parties that just literally formed less than a year ago. They were quickly fading from the scene. They were on their deathbed, basically. So Tusk has saved them, at least, for maybe the next election cycle. We'll see how long it lasts. But welcoming him back into the party is admitting that they have been completely useless for, as I said, almost a decade. Okay, so
like Tony Blair taking over the Labour Party.
Well,
again,
actually, yeah, that's true. On the other side, I can say this is a genius move. I guess it's not such an enthusiastic endorsement, but because it was the best card they could play. It was the only card they could play. They had nothing else. This is kind of the other side of the same coin that I mentioned earlier. Look, we're talking about them. They're back in the news. The whole country is talking about them, right? They're in the media spotlight. Who knows how long it'll last? We'll see. But if this doesn't happen, PO stays on the back page, stays kind of irrelevant, and this puts them back in the conversation, and suddenly there's an energy, there's a dynamism. Maybe it helps in terms of possibly fundraising, organizationally, just basically maybe starting to get their message together for the next election cycle, which, by the way, we don't know when it's going to take place. I think it's 2023 at the latest. So
yeah, we've still got a couple of years before we have the parliamentary elections, presidential elections. So this is actually kind of like mid-cycle right now.
Right.
So
So basically, just to summarize, it's a great move because it's just as I said, the best card they could play. But the other side of that same point is that it was the only card they could play, and so I generally I don't think this is a good look for them. But at the same time, it's a good move if that makes sense.
It's a good move, but you're right. It was pretty much the only move they had to do right now. It's like the question is, are they playing 4D chess, but didn't realize that it's actually a poker game they're at? What's going on here? And like I was saying, the initial polls have shown that PO has had a bit of a bump, somewhere in the 3 to 4% range. And most of those are voters that said that earlier would be backing Polska 2050, that party that came up with that TV personality. Exactly. And that party was like showing up as the alternative to all the other major parties of like undecided people who think they're centrist.
Yeah, Polska 2050 is the loser in this.
Yeah, and they basically dropped down from second to third position, with PO coming back to second position. Of course, PiS is still way ahead. And they've also, PO also took a few voters away from PSL and from the left. But, about more than half of it came from Polska 2050. And this might be, this party has been growing for a while, and this would probably stop that growth and maybe just consume them otherwise. Because all of a sudden, like, PO seems like to a lot of these like people who don't really follow politics that much, or more of the quote unquote centrists, feels like the true alternative now.
This is also a massive, massive risk. I mean, if this doesn't work out, and we define working out as PO taking back control of the parliament and maybe, the presidency in, when's the next presidential election? 2024? Well, whatever.
5, I think.
25, yeah. Sorry, 25. So at least taking back the parliament. If it doesn't happen, it's a massive humiliation for Tusk, and it's completely on him. He's basically up there right now in front of the camera saying, I am going to lead this party back to a majority, right? It's on his shoulders. And if it doesn't work out, he's completely to blame. And so there's a huge downside on this for this.
I mean, he could get away with losing the elections if it still means that PO is a strong opposition, as in it's back to a duopoly that you had 10 years ago, where the difference in vote is between it was only 2 or 3%, and all the smaller parties basically didn't matter right now. But right now, all the other parties opposing PiS are scattered, at least 10 points behind, all over the place. But the thing is, I really can't see voters from like Wolność or Konfederacja switching over to PO, because they for a lot of people, PiS and PO are basically the same group of politicians. They were connected, 30 years ago from a lot of the same roots, and they just kind of split on certain ideological ideals in the 90s and early 2000s. But for a lot of people outside of that group, they're still the same, political, like, elitist scum. So why would you want to get involved with them?
Speaking of elitist scum, I noted during one of the press conferences that I saw on television, and this is the quote that's being repeated a lot in the media, Tusk refers to the current government, headed by PiS, of course, as evil. Right, he says basically evil rules in Poland. That's a paraphrase of evil is ruling in Poland, and we need to do something about that. Now, this is standard, cheap political insult. Okay, I get it. But I'm sure that 30 minutes after that news conference, at maybe a different news conference in response to a different question, Tusk probably said something along the lines of, we need to work together, and the public wants bipartisanship, and they're sick of bickering and fighting, and we're listening to the people, and we're taking the high road, and this kind of, so it's just, you can't on the one hand say you're fighting evil, and then kind of, be the good guy, the nice guy at the same time. It's just kind of...
Yes, our opponent is a child-raping Satanist, but we're ready to work with him.
Exactly. But it's bizarre. I mean, it's one of these kind of fascinating things that's gone on for forever, really, is that on the one hand, we expect politicians to be, honest, have integrity and be true to their word, but in fact, we know they're all lying bastards. A bit like when you see actors and actresses taking a big moral position about something, and basically that, being on the stage is one step away. Well, yeah. Okay, well, I won't go there.
They were handed a card by their assistant and said, here, read this. We said earlier that if you hated Tusk before, you probably still hate him. Is he, I think I know the answer to this question, is he helped or hurt by having spent so many years with the fat cats in Brussels on his €500,000 salary, jet-setting around the continent, lecturing everybody about this and that? I think he's hurt.
Well, I think this is an interesting one because in my completely kind of anecdotal and unscientific assimilation of political feelings in the the grassroots level here in Krakow, it seems to me that a lot of people are pro-EU precisely and perhaps only because the Brussels is often in opposition with the extremist right-wing government that we currently all suffer under in this country. And in fact...
That was sarcasm, by the way.
My back still isn't healed from all those whiplash marks.
Yeah. Although my rowing skills are excellent these days. So I think... it's actually less about pro-EU sentiment and more the fact that in the absence of any kind of decent domestic opposition, the EU is acting as a counter to whatever peace try and kind of steamroller through. And, of course, there's going to be the situation that should the balance of power shift in the future and then... The new kind of government comes up against problems with the European Union, then I suspect some of these people who are pro-EU now will be less so.
Dr. Mike, you said earlier that Tusk had a reputation for being good with public relations and maybe the media aspect of politics, and I'm sure those are skills that he's sharpened even more during his time in Brussels. But that's not always the positive attribute that you might think it is. The knock on Tusk was... the criticism of Tusk was that he lacked a common touch, a little bit. He is that elitist scum. He's more happier in Brussels than in Warsaw. That kind of thing.
Himself more as a European.
He is a European first, exactly. And so it's not just the people who hated him before will still hate him. Even people who were maybe middle of the road on him a few years ago, looking at his behavior and his comments. As the European, commissioner?
He was president of the European Council.
President of the Council. That he probably turned a lot of people off with just his demeanor. I mean, the kind of superficial things that, that theoretically should not count, but in politics, in fact, count for a lot. What Duda has in terms of the likable kind of, friendly neighbor next door kind of, regular guy, Tusk has none of that. He has whatever the opposite of that is.
He's a technocrat.
He's a technocrat, exactly. And so he's a little too clever and media skilled for his own good,
he's
maybe.
He's a polished bureaucrat in that sense. And first impression, first few seconds, oh, this is nice. But when you try to peel back the layers there, it starts to seem like a very shallow, kind of superficial presentation. And the fact that he's always been known as the one who listens to the polls, and I mean, like surveys, and always swings in whatever way it looks like the populace generally wants, but also pushing whatever ideology is at a given moment the most popular one. He always presented himself, in previous years as a center kind of right, slightly winning politician. But the truth is, PO now has gone way left, despite whatever they might deny. They'll definitely deny that. And what we were talking about earlier, it's whether or not his background now with the EU will help or not. I think it would actually hurt because a lot of people argue well, what did you do for Poland while you were there? It's going to be hard to find very many specific things. Another thing is, and this sword is going to be hanging over voters and politicians during the next election cycle, is there can be this implicit suggestion from the EU that either you vote for Tusk and his crew, or maybe there'll be a little trouble with funding and other things along the way.
Nice country you got here, if you know what I mean. Be ashamed if something happened to it.
A lot of people might be enticed to vote for Tusk for that reason, and other people would just get pissed off at the EU, even though there won't be any direct thing, because there were kind of suggestions like that.
Oh, there's always a carrot and stick, and more stick than,
where PO and stuff like said, like, if you don't vote for us, who knows, there might be trouble getting some of that EU funding.
Hey, let me make this argument really quick and tell me what you think. He's got some negatives, he's got some issues to deal with, but at the same time, he is an experienced politician, technocrat, bureaucrat, sharpened all of his skills in Brussels. He's got a lot of smart people in his, we used to say Rolodex, but we don't have Rolodex anymore. What do we have today? His contact list. He can get the advice of a lot of sharp people. Maybe his political instincts tell him that 2 years from now, the political pendulum is ready to swing back the other way. Peace has the losing the enthusiasm. The scandals are building up. Their voter base not as enthusiastic maybe as they were at some point. And 8 years is a long time to be in power, just like PO had their 8 years, and Peace will have their 8 years. And it's not about the issues necessarily. It's about the timing, and he thinks the timing is right for things to go the other way. How about that?
I think that's absolutely right. Actually, I mean, you see that in other kind of democracies that a two-term government. You do all right in the first term, you get in sometimes with improved majority. Second term, by the way, halfway through the second term, then whether or not they're doing a good job, things like kind of sleaze stories emerge. There are scandals. People start getting fed up with this side of this and this.
The voter base is energized.
Yeah.
So about the pendulum swinging back, I think the one thing I have to remember here is that Poland is, especially the last couple of years, has not necessarily been a two-party kind of state. So a lot of people that voted for peace all those years ago were more, say, small government, conservative-minded, free business, and things like that, and traditional in their views, on social issues. And Peace hasn't really delivered a lot on those issues, and actually seems to be acting more like what they were opposing in PO years ago, like putting their people in these positions, more government, more spending. So I think a lot of people that will be pushed away from Peace won't be going towards PO because they see them as, like I said, the exact same thing. But so some of the other parties that have been presenting like values.
Well, speaking of the other parties, let's bottom line this for a second here. Do you think that the return of Donald Tusk means that Szymon Hołownia, Rafał Trzaskowski, Robert Biedroń, is it time for them to just sit down and shut up? They had their chance and they missed it. So, that window for them is over? Or is there still...
Trzaskowski is basically fallen in line already, just like everybody else in PO. It's like they've all like super... basically given up to Tusk here. Biedroń and Lewica in general, which were already three parties put together. Keep forgetting about that. It was Biedroń's party, was it Wiosna, it was Lewica, and it was Razem that came together to make, Lewica, which are barely holding together, and a minority party, basically, because a lot of the left-wing views that people have when it comes to like spending have gone to Peace, while a lot of people have like, say, more social social left-leaning views can vote for PO and stuff like that.
So maybe the Lewica, the leftists, are hoping to be the kingmakers in parliament, possibly.
Possibly, like if PO doesn't get enough votes, but they will bring in Lewica as a coalition partner. Right. But then you have, like I say, there are a lot of people with more right-leaning views, conservative views, free market views, and then they have parties like Konfederacja to look to, or even PSL has become more of like a centrist, but like small business-minded party in the last couple of years. So I don't see PO picking up too many more votes than it already has.
So is the return of Donald Tusk going to be Godfather Part 2 or Police Academy 7? Time will tell. We will see.
So Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th part. Whatever.
Pick of a number, yeah.
So many bad sequels. Anyway, we'll keep our eye on it. Of course, I'm sure we'll be talking about it more in the future. And again, big news in the Polish political scene. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for listening, everybody. KrakCast.pl is the site, of course. Check out all of our back episodes. And we'll catch you next time on the KrakCast.